So it is my great pleasure to introduce Michelle Clare this afternoon. I met Michelle virtually about a year and a half ago when she was invited to be part of a panel to speak at the Salt Lake City IANDS conference, which took place last September. And I was asked to be the moderator to help you through all of that in terms of your preparation. And she made such an impression that I couldn't pass up the opportunity of inviting her to speak to my group today. And finally, we're here. It's taken a few months. But Michelle is a certified medium. She's an angel intuitive. She's a spiritual coach, an energetic healer, an intuitive life coach, and she's had 3 near-death experiences throughout her life. And I know that has changed her life in very profound ways and influenced the work that she's doing currently. So without further ado, I'd like to hand it over and welcome Michelle this afternoon. How are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much for having me today, Angie.
It's a great pleasure.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here with everyone. One of the things that I love about sharing my NDEs is I really find that through people's NDEs are how we find the true nature of God, source, the divine, whatever this word is for our higher power. And what we find with this, it's so amazing, is that really it doesn't matter your race, your gender, your nationality, your religion. Most of the people that experience these NDEs truly find this unconditional love and bliss. And so a lot of the things that I will talk to you today about, if you've been following an NDE, you will have heard very similar stories. And so the part of my journey is that with these NDEs, they are truly what led me into launching my work as a medium. And so, yeah, let's just get started with that. I will start with when I was 12 years old, my grandfather transitioned. And at that point in time, I did realize he and I were still communicating. I would tell my mother about it and she would say, well, that's what you think Grandpa would say if he was still here. So in those days, I did not have a word for mediumship, and it wasn't really happening to me with everyone in my life. It was just happening to me with my grandfather who had transitioned. And so I just knew we were still in communication. It was a beautiful gift. And it actually is really where I believe my mediumship began. However, with each NDE, it is enhanced. So we go to my first NDE, which happened in April of 2005. And at that point in time, I was actually in the hospital already with my family. My sister-in-law, she was in there having a baby. So we had come to visit. I was in the hallway talking to her RN, who was my friend from high school. And all of a sudden I have this massive seizure. And I had never had a seizure before, and I've actually never had a seizure since. But what I remember is opening my eyes, and I am laying in this beautiful white room where the walls are almost alive. They are breathing. They are moving. Every cell or every molecule in these walls is radiating this light and love, this peace. And they are solid, and yet I can see they're almost breathing or alive. It was very beautiful, peaceful feeling. And as I kind of start to acclimate to where I am and I open my eyes, I really start to look around and feel it. I notice that I am laying with my head in my grandmother's lap. And she had passed a couple of years before this. So at that point in time, I was just in awe of where I was. There was no time. There was blissfulness, this unconditional love. My grandma looked like the brightest, healthiest version of her that I could remember. And so as I was laying in this truly just peaceful moment, all of a sudden I look up next to her and I see this angel that was about 12 feet tall. She was truly just radiant. And I want to say I felt almost sucked in to her presence or completely drawn into her. And at that moment, I decided, I want to see her feather wings, because I had always believed that angels had these huge feather wings. And as I went to look at them, what I saw is that they were actually truly made of light, and they truly seemed to move, and they were iridescent. They were energy. They seemed to span eternity. They looked very much like almost like the aurora borealis, where they were moving and yet beautiful. And as I looked at her, I remember thinking in my head, what is your name? And she answered me and she said, my name is Madeline and I'm one of your guardian angels. And I was very surprised because at this point in my life, I didn't know anything about telepathic communication. I had never heard the term near-death experience, but I was just sucked into her. And I was very surprised that she knew what I was thinking. And her energy was so loving. So really, I have no idea how much time in this space, because once again, I'm in this timeless space, but I felt loved, safe, perfect. I like to say, imagine the most complete you've ever felt in your life, times that by 1 billion. It was so complete and whole in that moment. The next thing I know, I hear someone yelling, code, code, code. And because I was already in the hospital, I had stopped breathing during this seizure and they had called the code team. And at that point in time, I was kind of thrust back into my body and my body felt so heavy, so dense. It felt like my arm weighed 500 pounds alone. And I remember just coming back with this sense of awe. And from that, I did have a physical recovery. I obviously had a big concussion because I had fallen and hit my head and a black eye and, all of those things like that. But it took me about 2 weeks before I was willing and ready to talk about this experience, because I knew I had had an experience, but I did not know what to call this. I had never heard of anything like this. I didn't know how to describe it exactly. And so finally, about 2 weeks afterwards, I told my mom and I said, Mom, when I had that seizure, I went to this place that had so much love, and grandma was there and she was young and healthy and vibrant. And there was this angel that was massive in size. And I really tried to explain to her this experience that I had had. And while my mom was very much intrigued by it, my mom was an RN. And so I could see her scientifically trying to figure out how that happened. Was this, an illusion that I was experiencing during the seizure? And so it really kept me from sharing this story with a lot of people or anyone else actually at that point in time, because I felt like my mom was my safest person to share it with. And if my mom was having a hard time comprehending it, I really didn't know another person that I felt like I could share this with. So I kind of take this experience, and probably like many people with NDEs, tuck it away in this very sacred place in my heart, because now I know there is more. I know angels are real. I know that my grandma knew I was coming. I don't know how she knew, but she knew, right? Because she was right there waiting for me. And so there was just this opening and awareness to a whole nother level. And yet at the same time, I felt very alone in this. There was no one that I really felt I could share it with. And as I said before, I had never heard the term near-death experience. I just knew I had had an experience. So I kind of take that, I tuck it away in my heart, and I keep living my life pretty normally, except I have this knowing and this awareness that there's more. I'm not alone on this journey. I have help, but I don't have anyone I can share this with in my life. So as beautiful and loving as it was, there was a little bit of a loneliness about it, because I didn't have anyone else who I could say, hey, I had this experience. And they said, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And this is what happened to me. So I just kind of moved forward. At that point in my life, I was married, but I didn't have kids. My second NDE happens in April of 2006. And this one happened after I had had my third child, my son. So he was 6 weeks old at this time. He was born April 1st. And yes, he is a little jokester still to this day. He was 5 weeks early. He does the whole thing. You're like, of course he was born on April 1st. But with that being said, after I had him, I had quite a few complications. And so I was in and out of the hospital for 6 weeks. After I had him, I would go in for about 5 days. I was running fevers. I had infections. They'd put me on IV antibiotics. I'd stop my fever. They'd send me home 2 days later. So I was really in and out of the hospital a lot. And finally, at the end of 6 weeks, they said, we need to do a D&C, which is a procedure where they clear out the uterus. And they said, we think you'll be fine after that. It's a 45-minute outpatient procedure. You're going to go home. It'll be great. And of course, me wanting to buy into the easy and quick fix, like most of us humans want to do, I was like, okay, I'm in. But the night before, I truly had this rock or this pit in my stomach. And I knew without a doubt that I should not do this, but they just made it sound like it would be easy and simple. And truly, it was what I wanted to hear. But I really had a bad feeling about it. So the next day I went into the hospital, and I remember talking to the doctor and the anesthesiologist, having them both assure me, oh yes, piece of cake, 45-minute outpatient procedure, you'll be fine. So I said, okay, and went ahead. I had had anesthesia before. Whenever I've had anesthesia, it is just a blank space for me. It's not a dream. It's not a darkness. It's nothing. It's just a nothingness is what I would call it when I've had it. And so I remember counting backwards for the anesthesiologist. And the next thing I knew, I'm in the operating room, laying on the gurney, and my beautiful 102-pound white German Shepherd Tahoe, who had passed a couple years before, walks in, lays her head on the gurney, looks at me, kind of gives me a smile, and we're gone. And we are on this phenomenal beach. And on this beach, there are colors of flowers and trees and light that I had never seen before. Every drop of water in this ocean, every cell and every molecule and every plant, every piece of sand, everything is radiating this light and truly unconditional love. And I remember feeling like it was not just feeling, seeing how bright and full of love everything was. And yet there was no sun in the sky, like say we would have here on a sunny day beach. It was literally that every cell and molecule in this realm was creating the light. It was the light. And so as I'm on this beach with my beautiful dog, once again, we're having telepathic communication. She's about an energy of about a 2-year-old German Shepherd. So she is radiant. She is glowing. She's in her prime. She's letting me know how happy she is that I am here with her. And we are running on this beach. And as we're running on this beach, I become aware of truly the most eternal moment, is what I would call it. There was nothing before or after. There was just each step and each breath that I was taking for this period of time. And in my human life, I have never found a way to be that present again, except through maybe a really deep meditation. But it really came down to, there was just each step and each breath. And as we are running along this beach, we run for what I would say felt like a long time, even though there was no time there. And I start to notice we're not getting hot, we're not getting tired, we're not getting thirsty. One of the funny things about this near-death experience is that I actually hate to run. So I'll tell my friends, if you see me running, call 911. That's an emergency. That's not me going out for a jog. And yet in this realm, I was loving the jog, the run with my beautiful dog. And so as we were on this beach, in this timeless space, and we're having this energetic telepathic communication going on, I become very much aware that my son, who's now 6 weeks old and was at home, was scared and calling to me because he knew I was getting ready to leave. And it actually is a little bit of, I would say almost like a jolt. Like here I am in this timeless, peaceful experience, and all of a sudden I'm brought back to this reality of, I have a baby, and this baby's scared. It knows I'm getting ready to leave. And at that moment in time, my soul actually goes to him. And I remember him energetically being scared because he had just shown up on planet Earth and I was getting ready to leave. I said to him, I said, I will find a way to stay. I'm not going to leave you. And all of a sudden I start praying. So a little bit more about my history. I was raised Catholic. And one of the great things about that is I believed I had angels and saints and all of these beings of light that wanted to help me. And so I just automatically go into this mode of praying. And I start saying, it's not my time. My kids still need me. I need help. I need to stay. And in that moment, I'm back in the operating room and I feel Jesus come in. And Jesus comes in truly as my friend, not saying bow down to me, pray to me, we'll see if I can help you. No, Jesus came in with this energy of like, I'm here, I'm your buddy, let me help you. And I see the operating room fill up. with this beautiful golden white light. And the next thing I know, I'm waking up in post-op. And I look at the clock on the wall and I notice that my 45-minute procedure took 3.5 hours. So as I go into my room and start finding out what happened, they had actually ruptured through my uterus and missed my aorta by 1 millimeter. And then what happened was they called in an emergency laparoscopic surgeon. And while he was in there, they ruptured through the uterus in the second place. So my 45-minute easy procedure turned into this 3.5-hour emergency procedure, which ended up taking me months and months to recover from. So it was really 3 to 4 months before I was even back to 80%. And I remember going into my hospital room after I got out of recovery. And at that point in time, I could still see my German Shepherd with me. And I was saying something about her to my husband. And I know he literally thought that I had maybe suffered brain damage from the surgery or from getting too much anesthesia or something, because I could still see her in the room with me. And she was just walking around, checking things out, making sure that I was okay. And so what I really learned in this near-death experience were some really powerful lessons. Once again, I didn't have the term near-death experience, so I didn't immediately share this with anyone. I knew I had had a very powerful experience. I was dealing with many, many physical complications. The amount of energy it would take me to get across the room to get to the sink or get across the room to get to the restroom felt like I was running a marathon. I mean, my body had just been through it. So I wasn't ready to share this experience with a lot of people, but here were a couple of things that I learned: that my soul could be in more than one place at a time, which is really important. And it's important for all of us to learn that, because there was part of me that was in the operating room. There was part of me that was on the beach with my beautiful dog. And there was part of me that went with my son. And so I really had this awareness that beyond my humanness, I was able to be in more than one place at a time. And I also had this knowing now of Jesus coming in as my friend and there to help me, and that it wasn't truly that I needed to worship him or follow him in that way, but that he was coming in and there to help. And so with this second NDE, I also feel very alone. I don't feel like I can share it with my husband. I don't have any friends I can share it with. I have no way to really put it into words, because for anyone who's experienced one, the challenge is always finding the words. There are a million feelings and very few words, because we're talking about something that happens on this energetic, telepathic communication level. And so that's part of the challenge with this. So I go back into life feeling very alone in this experience, feeling like I just need to heal my body, get back to being mom. I have a 5-year-old, a 2.5-year-old, and an infant. And so although this experience was life-changing for me, and one of the other lessons I learned was that, oh my gosh, my dog is in heaven. I mean, I thought she was, but now I knew for a fact she was, or this higher realm, whatever we want to call that. And so she also knew I was coming, right? Because she came into the operating room to get me. And one of the things that I found very intriguing about both of these NDEs is that my grandma and my angel knew I was coming. My dog came to get me. So there's an awareness or a psychic knowing on the other side that is easy for them to access, unlike it is in our human form. Because when it's our turn to transition, our loved ones are truly there and waiting for us in all shapes and forms. And so I take this NDE. I think about a month later, I kind of share it with my mom again, test the waters. And mom kind of is like, wow, that's quite the experience. How do you explain this? I couldn't explain it. And so although my mom believes me and knows I'm not making up stories, she's still a little bit puzzled because she doesn't know the terms near-death experience. And, she wasn't really able to support me in that way. And so I take this beautiful knowledge and awareness. And once again, the downside of it is it felt pretty lonely because there was no one that I could really share it with that could comprehend it. So I don't really do anything with this information except, again, tuck it away in my heart and keep going. So now at this point, this takes us to November 2011, which is my third near-death experience. And for people who like numbers, that happened on 11/1/11. So there were a lot of ones in that day for me. At this point, my kids are 5, 8, and 10, and I have 14-foot ceilings in my house. So I tell my younger two kids, my oldest daughter was in an after-school program. I said, let me get this done and we're going to leave. So what I have in my house is about 12 feet off the ground, these battery operated candles. And every night they would turn on, glow for 5 or 6 hours and automatically turn off. This is something I had done many times, change the batteries in them. I had never thought twice about it. So I said to the younger two kids, I said, I'm gonna climb up here. And after I change these batteries, we're gonna go get your sister. So I remember climbing up towards the top of the ladder. And as I get towards the top, I can feel it start to shift. And as it starts to shift, I literally thought, oh, this is gonna hurt, because I knew it was going down. And in that second, I am ripped out of my body. Not ripped out in a painful way, but ripped out in a fast way, like bungee cord fast, just sucked out of my body. I am turned around and I am facing my body in the ladder suspended in the air. And I'm standing with these 3 people. And I had never met them. I didn't know them, but they felt like close family or friends. I felt like they had known me my whole life. One was an Egyptian woman, one was an Asian man, and one was a Hawaiian man. And as I was standing there with them, I could feel the timelessness, the unconditional love. It felt really good. Like when you were in that space, you're not worried about getting anywhere else. It felt amazing. And as I was standing there with them, they looked at me and they said, what do you want to do? Do you want to stay or do you want to go? And as I heard them ask me this, and it was very much a telepathic conversation again, I remember thinking, this is so interesting because I have forever to decide if I want to stay or go. And yet my body is going to hit the floor in a second or less. And so truly for me, the pivot point of my entire life happens in the moment when spirit stopped time. And in that moment, I saw this beautiful angel come in, a different angel than from my first near-death experience. And this angel was dressed in red and gold. And when I saw this angel, I remember thinking, oh, this angel is here to either take me home or make something happen so that I could stay. And after I see this angel come in, and I'm trying to comprehend how I have forever to make the decision if I want to stay or go, I see my younger two kids in the kitchen. And when I see them, I immediately know, oh, I need to stay. And as I make this conscious choice to stay, I am immediately downloaded with a ton of information. And a lot of the information was like this. Okay, Michelle, you can stay, but being a stay-at-home mom's not your only purpose. You need to go back. You need to do your mediumship in the way that you can do it. You need to help people in the way that you can help people. There was this knowing that there was so much more planned for my life than I could even imagine. And that I had actually been playing quite small or safe up until that point in time. And so as I make this decision, I was also given the information that my marriage most likely would not survive me becoming a medium, even though I hoped that that wasn't going to be true. But I really came to this point where my way back to me and back to my kids was by saying yes to living and being truly who I am. Mm-hmm. And so in that moment, I say yes. And what happens is I fall, obviously, off the ladder. I hit the back of my head. So I had a 5.5-inch skull fracture that went up. I had a brain bleed over here. I lost my taste, my smell, my hearing, my equilibrium. And in those moments, I don't actually remember, and I want to say this to everyone, in the moments of the physical trauma that caused my near-death experience, my soul is not connected to the physical trauma or pain that my body is going through. So there was no part of me that remembers the pain of the fall or anything like that. Or, in the second one, them, missing my aorta, nothing like that. My soul is not connected to the pain that my body's going through. And so my body goes through this massive trauma. And my younger two kids who are home end up being the ones who call 911 to get me help. And so what happens then is I'm taken to the hospital, they do the CAT scan, they see the brain bleed, they say, well, we've got to get you to a trauma center, you need to go to a different hospital. So they take me to the next hospital, and I was in ICU for, I think, 3 days. But here are some of the miracles that happened around that. Number one, the skull fracture did not indent. Had it indented, I would have had to have surgery. It didn't. The brain bleed stopped on its own. So I ended up not needing brain surgery. Because my vestibular system was completely shattered, the cochlear in the right side was just traumatized. So with what happened with that was I couldn't even sit up. And if I lifted my head up 3-4 inches, I would vomit and vomit and vomit and have nystagmus in my eyes. So my eyes were twitching, doing this all the time. And in this hospital, they had a vestibular therapist who came in and a couple of days in a row did treatments on me, which felt like torture at the time, physical torture, because it was like being on every ride in an amusement park at the same moment. So you're going up and down and around and around. And I mean, it was just overwhelming for the senses, but it made the difference of me being able to sit up, of me being able to stand. When I was in the first hospital, my husband showed up there after the police called him. And I remember saying to him, I had this awareness that an angel had moved my head and I wasn't going to die. Because at that point in time, they were, they didn't know how far this was going to go. And I remember looking at him and saying, I'm not going to die, but you need to make sure I get to the next hospital. Well, the next hospital was the place where they had the vestibular therapist who was actually able to treat me so that I could sit up and walk again. And so as I'm in this hospital, I am honestly felt like my brain was scrambled. My memory was shot. Part of my vision was gone. I lost a lot of my hearing. I really do not have words for the physical trauma that I was going through at that point in time. But after about seven days, I'm let out of the hospital and I go home. And, the house that I lived in had about 10 foot. It had very wide hallways. But for me, I actually needed someone to help me walk, or I would find myself bouncing off the hallways because my balance was so horrible. I couldn't even get down, such a big hallway. I'd be bumping into the walls. And what I also found out was that I had lost my taste and smell. And I didn't realize that in the hospital, I think because there was so much other trauma going on. But when I got home and someone would bring me something to eat that I would normally eat, I either could not taste it, or I had what is called phantom taste and smell, which is called basically like phantom pain. So my body would get triggered to smell something. Here was the problem. Every time I smelled something, it tasted and smelled like rotting, dead, burning bodies. So I had lost, at best, I had no taste and smell left, which meant I only had the texture of food in my mouth. And at worst, I was literally in the bathroom vomiting from the taste and smell that my body was perceiving. So it was quite a horrible challenge. I found out that I had lost parts of my memory. I would run into people, places, and they would look at me and be like, oh, hey, how are you? And I literally was looking at them as a complete stranger. I could not place where they had come from in my life. And so I had a lot of physical challenges to overcome just to function in my daily world again. So my accident that happened on 11/1/11, was extremely challenging for a lot of reasons. Then we get to the holidays, and I had also broken my arm. Okay, that's a side note for me. But the reason that becomes important is because for my kids and for a lot of the people around me, that cast represented I was broken. But the minute that cast came off 6 weeks later, everyone started looking at me like, oh, it's Michelle. She's going to be fine. She's good. But here I am carrying this massive burden of the near-death experience that I had. And I did want to call it a burden in a way, because I didn't feel, once again, like I could share it with anyone. I didn't know that it was a near-death experience. I knew it was an experience. I knew that they had told me my marriage wasn't going to probably survive. I knew that they expected more from me. I had no idea how I was going to get from point A to point B. And yet at the same time, I was so grateful to be here, to live, to raise my kids. So I had so many mixed emotions going on. Then in January of 2012, my son, who was 5 at the time, started getting depressed because he had tried to call 911 and that 911 call did not go through. But we decided it must have been that he was so traumatized. Maybe he dialed, 991. Maybe he missed a button. We really, we knew he had tried. It didn't go through, and it was okay because my daughter's call had. But in January of 2012, he started telling me, my mom, my mother-in-law, anyone who really he felt safe with, he would say, I didn't need to be there when mom had her accident. I didn't do anything to help her. And we would say, but Josh, you opened the door for the policeman. You did help, and there was nothing we could say that could kind of bring him peace that he had helped. So the end of January, I was standing in my kitchen and the kids were at school. So I was home alone. And my grandfather, who had passed when I was 12, came through to me. And as a medium, most people don't usually manifest in front of me, but he actually did. And the first thing I said to him was, it has been so long since I've seen you. And he said to me, I knew it would feel like that to you. And I thought, well, that's interesting. But see, I still wasn't in the point where I was connecting that our loved ones in spirit are with us all the time. And so he was acknowledging the difference in the realms that we live in, right? Where I was like, I haven't seen him in so long. And he said, I knew it would seem like that to you, because in his world, he's still connected to me every day. And so as he stood in my kitchen, he talked to me about my accident, about my head injury, and about my son, Josh. And he said to me, he's really good with electronics. Now, here's the other beautiful thing about this. My grandfather and my son never even walked this earth at the same time. So this also tells me that spirit, our loved ones in spirit, are connected to us. I mean, how many times do we know a friend or family member who says, oh, I just wish mom or dad had met my kid? Guess what? They have, because my grandfather, who never walked this earth, knew about my son when they never walked at the same time. And he said to me, he's really good with electronics. You need to get the 911 recording. There's something on there that you should know. And I didn't even know that I could get the 911 recording. So I went down to the police station and I ordered it, and it took a couple weeks to come in. And I went ahead and I got it and I played it, and I hear them say, 911, what's your emergency? And in his little broken voice, I hear my son Josh say, Sophie, what do I say? And then he laid the phone down. And for the next minute and a half, you could hear 911 trying to get their attention. And they would say, can you hear us? What's happening? What's going on? And you can hear my kids in the background talking. And my son says to my daughter, I'm going to go push the panic button on the house alarm. And she says, hold on, let me try calling 911 first. So she hangs up the phone. She calls 911 and her call went through. So when he came home from kindergarten that day, I said to him, I said, Josh, I said, your call went through. Help was coming, because they had already dispatched the police officer from the first call, which was his. And what we found out later was, just in the trauma of the moment, he had actually forgotten that he had called. And that's why he lays the phone down and says, Sophie, what do I say? And then they just get swept up in the trauma. And after that moment, when I was able to share that with him, it was as if I had lifted this 10,000 pound weight off this little boy. And you could see his self-worth come flooding back in. He had done something to help me. Help was coming. This also opened the door to my mediumship, because I had kind of, I would say, been swept up in life again, trying to recover, trying to manage life. And I had also, once again, put that on the back burner. But now my grandfather, who was such an important role in my life, came in to give me information that changed the course of the life of one of my children who I couldn't have loved more. And I got it. I got that there was something really important about this and that it was something that I needed to do because it changed lives. And I actually got to watch it change my son's life. And so at that point in time, I'm still going through a lot of physical trauma and trying to heal. But there's an awareness to me of like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to get there from here, but I do feel like I need to follow this road. And at the same time, my humanness was filled with fear. So a few months later, I go to counseling. I start with counseling because I was raised in a Catholic background. We were practicing Christianity, and I didn't know how I was going to blend these worlds. And I also was very hesitant to share this with people because I had shared this with my mom again, and my mom was in awe and totally believed this. This was her dad who had come through, but once again wanted me to explain how did this happen? And I couldn't. And I wasn't ready to share it with my husband because he was very resistant to mediumship and these types of ideas. And so I went to counseling and started with an amazing counselor. As all of our lives are spirit led, whether we're aware of it or not, I got led to the right counselor who said, Michelle, what a gift. Think of the people you can help. Think of the ways that people can navigate their life better when they're tuning into this. And I was with her for a few years, and probably about a year and a half, actually. After that, at some point, she said, Michelle, we need to get you a mentor. We need to find somebody who can help you to hone in on these gifts, because I did not feel like I could control it at that point in time. It felt like it came to me, spirit made it happen, and then I didn't know how to find it. It was on demand. I could not find it on demand. So I found a mentor and started working with him. And really within a few years, I felt that I had trained this quite well and was really able to guide and direct and help people, not because of me, but just because I listen to spirit. So I always like to remind people, it's not me that knows what's right for you. It's your spirit team. And what my near-death experiences have shown me is that we all have angels, loved ones, and life guides that are around us at every moment, that none of us are living this life alone. And we have this support team that is here to help us each step of the way, even when we don't know how we're going to get from point A to point B. So what I do as a medium is I listen to your support team and I share with you the information that they're giving to you. One of the interesting things about all of these near-death experiences and the physical trauma that I had gone through. So at this point, a few years later, I still have the phantom taste and smell. And it's awful because sometimes we would go out to eat and I'd be running for the restroom to go vomit because whatever the restaurant was, or I'd walk by Starbucks and it was the coffee smell, but that's not what my body said. My body said, oh, rotting dead, burning bodies again. And not just would I smell it, I would taste it. Oh. And it was very, very challenging. Honestly, it was very challenging. So I had talked to my neurologist and he said, Michelle, this is the best you're going to get. You're never going to get better. You're going to have to learn to live with this. And I remember coming home and feeling very, very depressed for about 24, 48 hours. And then at some point, I just had this awareness where I said, that's not going to be my story. I don't know how this will change. I don't know when, I don't know how, but it will change. This is not going to be my story. And so one of the things that I was able to do was create a space to not own what I had been told. Now, I do think the doctor was giving me his best advice from everything that he knew and all of the work that he had done. But in my humanness, I wasn't going to own the space that I was done healing. And so a few years after that, I met someone who told me, hey, there's this lady here. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and she's up in Paradise Valley. And her name's Sarah O'Meara, and she does healings. You should start going to her services. So I start going to her services. And I went for probably 8 or 9. She does one a month. And she actually has built a chapel on her property. There'll be 100 to 200 people who show up. It's packed. And what happens with her is every day before her service, she goes into a meditation or prayer mode. And the Holy Spirit will come in and tell her who and what will be healed the next day. And when I say who, it's not like a name, but basically the Holy Spirit will say to her, hey, tomorrow we're going to do back healings, and here's a little information, or whatever this is. So I started going with my friend who was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And I felt like I really wanted her to receive a healing. I knew that I could live and survive the way that I was. It wasn't ideal, but it was absolutely doable. But we started going together because I knew she couldn't survive the way she was. And so we went to this Christmas service 3 years after they had told me I was done healing, and they'd been right up until that point. And at one point in the service, this lady, Sarah O'Meara, calls out back healings. And she says, someone who fell off of a ladder and hurt their back. And so at that point in time, anyone with any back problems will stand in the audience, and she will go around the room. And so there were about 10 people who stood up, and I was the last one that she got to. And I kept expecting with each person them to say, I fell off the ladder. I fell off. No one said it. She came to me and she said, and I said, I'm the one who fell off the ladder. And she looked at me and she said, well, of course you did. God knows you fell off the ladder. And at that moment, I truly felt this beautiful healing energy, which she would describe as Holy Spirit, coming through my back. The warmth, the tingling, the emotion with it was a spiritually transformative experience for sure, even though I didn't have to, thank goodness, have the NDE with it this time. And I could feel that love and that timelessness and this healing energy. And so I was almost overwhelmed by this healing, because there was part of me that was questioning it. Did that work? Am I really healed? I don't know. But I had had a lot of back pain. So I had had scoliosis previous to my fall off the ladder. But then falling off the ladder, not only did I hit my head, I landed on my back too. So I had had a lot of back pain. So we go home that night. I was a little bit feeling guilty because I really wanted my friend to get a healing who was there with me, because I knew her disease was terminal. My, I guess I would say, miserable inconveniences were not, but she didn't receive a healing that night. So I come home kind of in a daze about what just happened. The next morning, my husband said to me, well, how did it go? And I said, you're not going to believe this. I got a healing. She called out, someone who fell off the ladder, and I could see him looking at me completely skeptical. Once again, here I am having this STE, and I don't want to share it with someone, because he just looked at me like, you might be crazy now that you're telling me this happened. So I go to open the door. This was at Christmas time, to let the dogs out. And for the first time in 3 years, I smelled Christmas, or that wintry smell in the air. And then that day my son wanted a hot dog for lunch. I made him a hot dog, and it actually smelled like a hot dog, not like a dead, rotting body. My daughter wanted hot chocolate. It smelled like hot chocolate. And so I had this instantaneous healing. And although it was on my back, it healed parts of me that I didn't even know were possible to heal anymore. And so that's why one of the great messages I love to share with people is, I do believe the doctors and people in your life will give you the best advice they can, but you always have this power to say, that is not my story. That's not how my story is going to end. And whatever it was that was divinely guided in me to hold that space for myself, even though it took a few years, was what actually led me to the place in my life of receiving a healing for that. And the ironic thing was, a few years after that, I had to get a back x-ray, and my scoliosis was gone. The scoliosis I had had my whole life was completely gone. And the chiropractor was looking at me and said, you don't have scoliosis. I've had scoliosis my whole life. No, you don't. Look at your x-ray. It was unbelievable. And so that's the other part that I love to share with people. Miracles are available to all of us. And when I asked Spirit about this, and I said, well, how come some people receive miracles and some people don't? Spirit said, Michelle, we don't even call them miracles. We call them happenings. They happen when you get in alignment, body, mind, and spirit. And so one of the greatest things you can do for yourself is live in alignment, body, mind, and spirit, because that's where the miracles or the magic happen. I would say one of the beautiful things about these 3 NDEs, although they felt very lonely at times, and I didn't even actually know they were near-death experiences, I just knew they were experiences. I also didn't really have a word for mediumship in the beginning, and then I found out there was a word for it. One of the most beautiful things about this is that they opened up this conscious framework inside of me. And I actually felt like I had become almost an ambassador sent back to planet Earth to remind people, you have a spirit team, you have loved ones, you have angels, you have life guides. They are here to help you. You will not fail your life's mission. It's absolutely not going to happen. And so we have this team of loved ones that wrap their wings and their arms around us to support us every day in every way. And whether we're aware of it or not, it doesn't matter. It is still there. And so, yes, I did this the hard way. I learned the hard way. I don't recommend that for people, but I would say for whatever reason, this is the way my soul chose to learn. And now my ability to help people with their own situations is amazing because I can tap in with their spirit team. I can see, we all have a soul plan. None of us are here accidentally. We're all here with a purpose. Our souls all chose to come here. And so even if we consciously in our humanness don't understand, why did my soul choose this? There is a reason. And one of the things that Spirit has taught me is that part of our soul plan is always found in the comeback, right? So maybe we haven't all physically died, but we have died a million times in one lifetime. We've lost a job, we've lost a marriage, we've lost a loved one, we've lost a pet. There are a million ways that we are presented with transition and dying and challenges, every single one of us. We experience many deaths or transitions over and over again. But for our soul, it's not actually about that experience. It's about the comeback. Because on a soul level, when you know that you are truly eternal and that your relationships are eternal and that on the other side of this earth plane, there is love and your worst enemy is also still your friend on that other side, you really are able to start seeing that there is this continuum of life. And the lessons aren't in the dramatic situation that happens. It's in your comeback and the way that you learn to navigate it. And you're not doing it alone. You've got this whole spirit team to help you. Your soul has a higher plan. And with this higher plan, it's about this constant evolving, learning, and growing. Our souls are never bored. They are never done. Even when we leave this world, we'll continue to grow and evolve. Okay, Angie, do you have questions?
It was just amazing. Oh my goodness. Wow. And how your experiences are built on the previous ones. But the last one, I think, is obviously the one that is the most extraordinary. Obviously, you went through so much in terms of your injury and then the recovery. But the fact that you were able to get this healing so many years later, and it seemed to come through the back, but it restored your back, but it also restored you back to a normal sense of smell and taste. Could you say now that you're fully recovered from all of the injuries that you've sustained over those, 3 different NDEs? Are you completely back, or is there's still some aspects of your physical body that are affected by what happened?
Yeah, I still have some aspects of that. So I wear a hearing aid. So my hearing didn't come back 100%, although it is probably 80% better than it was after the accident. So it was drastically improved. And that was another thing the doctor said, no, your hearing will never get better than this. I held this space for it to get better. I didn't even know what that looked like, but it's much, much better. So I have a hearing aid now, and I have vertigo. So I have to be aware of that. If I put my head in the wrong position, or a lot of times with the barometer, when storms come in, I'll get dizzy. But those are pretty much the only 2 things. I have a blind spot in my right eye, but our brains are so amazing that most of the time I don't see it because my brain just patches in what it thinks should be there, and it's usually pretty much right. Also, I have a thing with my eyes where they will turn off and on. So like my left eye might be on and my right one turns off. And so I didn't even know this until I went to visual therapy. And because your brain, right, it always wants to heal. And so what my brain does is I don't consciously see one eye turning off unless that eye is patched. And I'm like, why is everything dark? My brain says, oh, here's the whole picture, Michelle. So holding that space to heal is amazing. And yes, I mean, I still have some, like I said, some things like that, but overall, I am so much better.
It sounds as though those issues that you still have are somewhat manageable, but some of the big things that you were dealing with clearly have been straightened out. Do you think that your openness, I mean, clearly going with your friend to this healing made a huge difference, but do you think also it was how receptive you were, the alignment, as it were, of mind, body, spirit? What do you think actually brought about this sort of miraculous healing that you experienced?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it truly was my openness, because what happened was, even though the doctor had given me his best opinion, which was pretty dismal, I always held the space to say, that's not going to be my story. I don't know how, but that's not going to be my story. I will not own that. And that wasn't anything that a human had told me or taught me how to do. It was more of a spirit guided message. And I think we all have these whispers, right? We all have this intuition. We all have it, whether it's like, hey, choose that, don't choose that, or call your friend, check on this person today, whatever these whispers are. It was this whisper from spirit of, that's not your story. And because of that beautiful whisper, I guess I would say, I was able to hold the space for that. And that is actually what gave the healing the ability to happen. Because had I bought into the plan of, this is my story, I will never get better, that would have been my story. Our free will, and we do have free will, our free will is in our mind. It's not necessarily in our physical being. So if the free will is, I might not have wanted to have the car accident today, that wasn't my choice, but I have the free will and the perspective of how I want to see that. I can say, oh my God, that was horrible, the car was totaled, or I could walk out and say, what a blessing I lived.
Absolutely. So I do want to encourage people to either, write their questions in chat or raise their hands. You can actually do the raise hand function as well. Or just put your hands up. And so let's go ahead. We have a question from Rita. It'll take a moment to unmute you, Rita. Please go ahead in a moment and just ask a question. Here we go.
Michelle, I have listened to you on a variety of programs.
Thank you.
Well, a lot of, not only are you gorgeous and I love your two angels in the background, but just like, well, that's the perfect setting. But I never heard the piece about Sarah O'Mara.
Mm.
And what I really want to say is, it's a strange journey. And the fact that one of my kids, 40 years old, stage 4 melanoma, saved by medical science, but can't be healed by medical science. And so I've ended up living here in Virginia. I'm going to somebody who is a medium, but she's also got shamanic tools. Mm-hmm. And this whole idea of going in and talking to our guides and being raised Catholic, couple of 20 decades as a I'm like, well, this is fascinating stuff. And there's strangely a practicality to, oh no, I've learned that I really can't communicate with spirit. I've prayed my buns off on my knees for years and I had my miracles. But that connection, could you talk a little bit more about knowing that inner source that is you, that is always connected, as always will be connected, has their different experiences, and how that relates to, I don't know, intuition or being brought to a Sarah or a shaman or whatever it might be?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, let me just tell you, I do have good feelings about your son. So listen, the ability to heal is within all of us, period. here's what happens. That connection that is on every living creature here has a soul. It is our natural antenna. It is our God-given birthright to always be connected to source. You cannot disconnect from source. Even if you decide you're an atheist, you cannot disconnect from source. It's impossible. And so because of this beautiful tool that we all have, it is our natural GPS. It is our guidance system. It is the whispers. Now, some people hear it more loudly than others, or I say hear. I mean, there are people that actually hear messages. There are people that feel them. There are people that would say, I just know. I mean, it doesn't matter how you're getting your information, but imagine turning the volume up on that, because that's what I'm doing when I'm working as a medium. I say, look at this all as a radio or a frequency. So if you come in and you say, hey, I've got to talk to my angels, I'm going to dial up channel 111. I'm going to the angel channel. I'm turning the volume up and I'm going to say, what do we need to know here today? And this is a tool and a gift that every single human has. What's happened over time is we've kind of been dumbed down. We've been told, oh, you can't do that. That can't happen. Follow this person to God. This person will lead you there, whatever that looks like. And we've given our power away to religions, to governments, to just whatever, a different person in our life, somebody who knows better for us than we do. But the truth is, this gift, which is your soul, which is always connected to source, turn up the volume on it. What is your team saying to you? And we can all do that. So whether that's in meditations, whether that's in following little feelings, whether that is, I like to say, play with it. So maybe before you go to the grocery store, you say, okay, Spirit, what am I going to see there today? Oh, and all of a sudden you see a yellow dress. So now you're going to go to the grocery store and let's see. You walk in, there's a lady in a yellow dress. You're like, oh, I'm following the whispers of spirit. But your team is here to really help you achieve your life plan. Now, we are all going to leave this world in not our physical form, right? So at some point we will all transition. But for many, many people, the illness, the disease is actually an energetic disease or a lesson. It's not actually meant to be the cause of your transition. Yeah. So if we save the room or the space, and like I said, we don't have to know how, because the minute I say spirit is going to heal me this way, I have now limited how spirit's going to heal me. I saw one option, they saw 1,000, right? So that's why I say, hold this space. That's not my story. It's not my story. That's all I had to know. I didn't have to know how or when or who or why. All I had to know was that was not going to be my story, and that at some point it would all work out. And that's really the gift here as the human. When we think we need to know exactly how it's going to happen, we're actually limiting spirit to work in our life. So turn up the volume.
For a specific outcome, not a smart idea.
Right. I would always like to say this when I always say, may this work out for the best and highest outcome or good of all. Because then I'm really giving spirit like this boost of energy to work with me, instead of saying, well, in Michelle's mind, this is what Michelle thinks is best. You know what I mean? Well, Michelle doesn't know what's best for everyone. Spirit world does. So giving them that room to work in your life. And when we talk about room, let's talk about this real quick. I survived one accident by 1 millimeter, but the surgery, right? The second NDE, because they missed my aorta by 1 millimeter. The second one, which I might have forgotten to say this, I actually survived that one by 1/2 inch. I missed my brainstem by 1/2 inch when I hit the corner of the granite island. So literally that was how much the angel moved my head. 1/2 inch would have changed everything. Spirit needs 1 millimeter to work in your life. You don't have to clean out the whole house or give them 1 millimeter and watch the miracles that can happen. But too often we are convinced we have to do it the human way, or that person knows better for us. We must follow their way of telling us to do it. Give spirit 1 millimeter to work. It'll change your life.
Did you you had some insight into Rita's son situation?
It's actually my daughter. It's actually.
Is it your daughter? Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, this is what I want to say, because there's an opening that's happening in the heart energy that I can feel for your daughter. So whether she's learning to love more deeply, more profoundly, love life, sometimes we don't love life until we are faced with the option of losing it. And then all of a sudden we say, I love life. I want to stay. I'm not done. And it reignites our fire and our spark and our passion to be here. And so I do feel for your daughter, there is an opening of heart energy, which is amazing because everything in this world is actually created from a space of love, love of source, love of God, gives us this ability to have this experience here. And so the more that your daughter decides, I love this, I'm not going to leave 1 second early. This place is too good. I'm getting to live this chance, and lives in alignment with love and love of herself and love of the spirit world, the more she's creating the space for the healing to happen. And Spirit's mentioned to me before, Western medicine is amazing. It's a tool. Eastern medicine's amazing. It's a tool. They're all tools. So I'm not against any of them. I would say take the best advice and use it, but always hold that space for more.
Great. Thank you.
One of the points in your story here that I found fascinating is when you talked in your third near-death experience about your grandfather coming to you. Mm-hmm. And, the problem that your little son had when he was trying to reach out to 911 and didn't feel that he had actually gotten through and was depressed about it. And that was weighing heavily on him. And I think, and I don't know the order of this exactly, but the idea that your grandfather somehow said he's very good at electronics, and I think led you to the notion of going back to the police department and getting the recording, which then, of course, brought to light the fact that he had actually called and you knew exactly what happened. So you were able to go back to him and settle him down because your grandfather saw that if you didn't do that, this would have weighed heavily on your son, possibly in perpetuity. I mean, it would have been something he'd have dragged throughout his whole life and it would have held him back. So I love these instances where spirit comes in and really guides the living in such a way as to kind of open up a healing in ways that we here on this side could never have been able to do. I just absolutely love that.
I love that too. Thank you for pointing that out. Absolutely. Because human Michelle would have said, well, maybe we can go find a counselor. Maybe we can go, I would have approached it with my humanness, but You're right. He cleared up this situation in a second.
Right. And the counselor, and, I'm a therapist myself, would have done her very best, of course, but how could she have had any insights? She can only really go on what the client is telling her at any given time. And so the chances are it might have been patched around the edges, but the wound would never have been removed because there wasn't the actual knowledge that he had in fact gotten through. And so I think that I love that. There are so many aspects of your story that are just fascinating, these little tiny jewels, just that sort of pave the way to this greater understanding and greater knowledge.
And I want to say that that's there for all of us. It really is. So many times in my life, and this is very human, but I don't necessarily know exactly what the next step is, but I have the faith to put my foot out and assume that step will materialize. And that is really, yes, that is really living a spirit-led life. And is it blind faith? We have a human way of looking at this, right? I don't know. But the fact is that every time we make that step and we don't know exactly what the outcome is going to be, but we're trusting spirit or our intuition or whatever that step is, it does turn out for the highest good.
Absolutely. So we have a question from Linda. How did Michelle find out that her experiences were NDEs? Did her mother accept the explanation, and what about her husband?
Yeah. So I actually found out from my counselor who I went to after I had the head injury and was telling her about this. She said, well, Michelle, you've had near-death experiences. What? Are you sure? I had no idea. Are you sure that's me? I had experiences. I don't know if they're near death. She's like, Michelle, yes, go look into this. So then I just kind of started looking into it and I was like, okay. So I shared it with my mom, and my mom was more open to it then, because now we had a time when these started happening. It was before Google. It wasn't like we had the unlimited information resources that we have now. So my mom was much more open to it. My husband and I were actually in a divorce now. It's been going on for a while. So he never was able to wrap his head around any of that being an NDE. He still would refer to it today as your brain injury or your accident. So even the term near-death experience was too woo-woo or too out there for him. He still can't process that. And then that just leads you into knowing, like, my mediumship was very challenging for him, which also is what led to the end of our marriage. So there were multiple things, but for many people who've had NDEs, you've heard this, and this is true. You cannot come back the same person. You cannot go through an experience like that, know what you know, feel what you feel. Many of these things are truly beyond our human language. So a lot of what I actually felt or knew, I can't even express to you because our language doesn't allow for that. You cannot have these experiences and come back the same person. And so because of that, here's a painful part of all of this. When I decided to commit to my mediumship, to learning it and sharing it, I started down the road to lose my marriage. I lost friends. I lost people who had been part of my life for a very, very long time. And it was painful and it hurt. And I didn't know why they would look at me. They had known me forever. They knew who I was. I wasn't actually becoming evil or Satan worshiper or whatever they thought I was doing. But they could not accept me for who I now was. And so that was one of the very biggest, scariest, hardest challenges of all of this, was to follow through with my soul's plan for me, even though it meant I was going to lose some really important people.
Mm-hmm. A couple of points I'd like to make. One is how extraordinary that your counselor at the time was well versed enough in the near-death experience to recognize your symptoms and be able to identify them, which then opened up the whole world of literature and other people, so you didn't feel as though you just landed from Mars, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And that speaks to IANDS' efforts to really try to educate not only the medical community, who are the first responders, but also to therapists, counselors, because even though it's a relatively small demographic who's had the near-death experience, but it's becoming more, it's happening more and more. And so for those individuals to be aware of the phenomenon is so important. So it was good that she knew that. I wanted to go back to a point that you made earlier, and that is in your third near-death experience, where you're sort of suspended in this moment of, reality is suspended, you're falling off the ladder, but you haven't hit the ground yet, and you become quite aware of what's going on this other realm. Another angel comes, you're aware that your children are in the kitchen, and there's almost an instant there where you decide, do I leave, do I go? And you decide to stay. And your kids, I think, are, part beckoning you without even knowing it. But then you become aware that if you do stay, that it's going to come with somewhat of a price. Mm-hmm. You have a choice. But coming back is going to require some things of you. One of the hardest of which, of course, was a realization that your marriage was potentially going to break up because it wouldn't have been able to withstand this transformation that you were going through. And the second was that, your life purpose or your work and the gifts that you gained from these experiences could actually come into fruition, and you could help a lot of other people. So, and you were brave enough to even then, I guess, go through and decide that you wanted to come through. You wanted to come back. Do you think that you really could have checked out at that point if you'd really wanted to?
I actually do. And I'll tell you why. I do believe in reincarnation. I did not before all of this. I do since my third near-death experience and working as a medium. Because earlier I said something about it's always about the comeback, right? So even if I had chosen not to fulfill this part of my soul's purpose in this life, I would still get another opportunity too. So I do believe, and I found this out, I have found that the ability to transition or die or whatever we want to call this actually kind of happens on levels. So this is my understanding. Number one, physical trauma. So can the body still sustain life? Sometimes bodies are damaged beyond the point of sustaining life. And we see that happen all the time. If that's the case, then whoop, you get to check out. Number two, the soul's plan is part of the transition process. So let's say my soul had a purpose or a lifeline that the universe decided this has to happen. If that was true, I would not get the option to go. It would be like, sorry, Michelle, your body can sustain life. You are fulfilling this plan. But the third level is that source. So we have source that is like, you can come home, you need to stay. There's an answer that happens on that level. In this lifeline or timeline of my life, if let's say Michelle cannot fulfill the plan, or I say, hey, I want to go home, then is there another soul that is going to be able to step up and fulfill that purpose in that timeline? So would there be another medium who say came into, it and was able to all of a sudden share a very similar message? So it's not always just about the individual soul. I mean, things are happening on multiple levels in one lifetime. You have your humanness, your soul plan, and the divine plan. So we're already looking at multiple timelines happening from one life.
I haven't heard that before. That's interesting. Let's come back to that. But let me ask you a question regarding reincarnation.
Mm-hmm.
Here is that, we choose to come here to have these life lessons, and we have a soul family, if you will, a soul group. And so your spouse, your ex-husband, no doubt was part of that experience. Did you get any insights into whether you kind of knew that you were going to be up against this sort of crossroads? Did he sign up for it as well? I'm just curious about that, because there's such a juxtaposition between the two of you, and yet, it's all part of this experience. So
right. Yeah. So the information that I've received on that was he also had the opportunity to change his mind and grow with me, right? So we both had free will in that situation, but it was most likely he wasn't going to, and that seems to be the correct path that they took. I also had that opportunity that I could have said, yes, I will go back and I will do this, and I didn't. But I actually think had I made that choice, I probably wouldn't still be here. Something else would have happened and I would have left, because there was something about the commitment of, I will follow through with this plan, a recommitment to myself, to my soul, to this lifetime.
interesting. So very intricate. There seem to be crossroads at almost every point.
I know there are. And I think
one direction or another. Yeah, go ahead.
We try to simplify these things because it's easier for our humanness to comprehend. And I do think in a lot of ways it is simple, but there are multiple things that are happening at one time, right? I mean, just think about you. If you're making Thanksgiving dinner or something, you've got a turkey going, maybe mashed potatoes, got the gravy going. This is our soul, because our soul is multidimensional and it can be in more than one place at one time. It is truly eternal. It is evergreen. It has existed since the moment it was spoken into creation, and it will continue to exist. Because of this, we have multiple things that we want to learn, do, and connect with that go in alignment with our human plan, our soul's plan, and the divine plan. There are multiple plans happening.
So that's a wonderful segue into those three plans. I've never heard that before. Is that sort of received wisdom in the world of the near-death experience? Or is that your particular understanding from the experiences you've had? Because I've never come across that before.
Yeah, I can't say that I've heard that anywhere else except from spirit, but we have multiple plans happening at one time. And
an individual plan, what else?
So we have our human plan, we have our soul plan, and there's a divine plan.
Okay, so please tell us more.
Yeah. So Michelle's human plan might be today, I'm going to go have pizza for lunch. Tonight I'm going to meet with a friend. Like human Michelle has some plans for today, right? Some social plans, some things I want to see happen with my life, some things that I'm like, oh, it's a great day. I'm going to go for a swim in the pool. I don't know. Maybe I'm going for a hike, but I have my human plans, things that my soul wants to experience, that are humanness of me and things that I want to do. That's my free will. I want it because my free will is like, hey, I can go to a restaurant and order whatever I want off the menu. Spirit's not going to tell me, no, you can only have the salad today with no dressing. You know what I mean? So I do have this human plan with free will that I get to experience. My soul plan is the blueprint that my soul created before I came in for this lifetime. And whatever this soul plan looks like, and I don't know the details of it, it does get revealed to me more and more as I go. But my soul plan is that my soul said, okay, I want to come to be to planet Earth. I want to have 3 children. I'm going to name them this, this, this. I'm going to try to remember who I am. I'm going to try to remember that I came here to help people with the gift of mediumship and reminding them of their spirit team. And my soul says, whatever my soul plan is, I want to learn this lesson. I want to learn compassion. I want to learn the pain of a divorce, because in this heavenly realm, we don't know the pain of a divorce. All we know is oneness. I want to learn, whatever these things are that my soul wants to learn. And then on top of that is the divine plan, which is the universal plan, the God plan, whatever we want to call this, whatever word you're used to using. And this plan says, hey, I'm opening up the school of planet Earth. These are the courses you could take. Who would like to sign up for these courses? And how are you going to help each other learn while you're doing that, while improving and growing the vibration of planet Earth to a better level? So there is truly a divine creative plan. So people like to think that it's real simple. And in some ways it is, but there are multiple plans happening at one time.
No, extraordinary. Okay, very good. So do you think that sort of divine plan is part of what we hear about in terms of the earth transitioning to this sort of larger awakening, and sort of just splitting off the Dolores Cannon work and various other people? Is that part of that sort of larger plan, that the, extraterrestrials are trying to get humanity to become more compassionate and just trying to be a guiding, a loving guiding force?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. So we always have, and I've learned this from Spirit too, and I think we've heard about this too with many people who've had a negative NDE, because there are people that haven't always had love and light and all of that, right? What happens is our spirit team, whatever this is, they are always holding the space for us to move up in vibration, in love, and in light. So many people who've had a negative NDE experience have now claimed, oh, you know what? I think I created that myself. But while I was in that, maybe some of them say God's hand came in and reached and pulled me out into the light or whatever. There was always space being held around each of us to upgrade to the next level. So whether that's the level of consciousness, of love, of light, of vibration, whatever that is, even in our human form, because we know people in our human form that we might look around and we think that there are a lot of people that might be sleepwalking right now. And then we look at other people like Joe Dispenza or someone else, and we might say, oh my gosh, he's cutting edge right there. And yet the planet Earth vibration has room to hold all of those people. But there's always a space being held around each of us by benevolent beings of light to upgrade to the next level of consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you. So we have a question from Carmen. What a fascinating story. What can we do in our daily lives to connect with the higher realm, or this higher realm that you've been discussing, that was revealed to you, and live with a more expanded awareness?
Yeah, I love that. That's a great question. So one of the things that I like to do when I wake up every morning is I just say, Spirit, what do I need to know today? So I'm not necessarily directing it at God or my angels or my life guides or my grandma or my grandpa. I'm just saying, what do I need to know today? And then I just kind of take a deep breath in and I let that message come in. Some days it's like, okay, Michelle, depending on my work, client number 2, you're going to have to get them from point A to point B. But other times it's like, Michelle, today you need to just be present. A lot of times the easiest way to connect to spirit, not a lot of times, the only way to connect to spirit is in the present moment. So by being present is how you're going to connect and enhance this. So when I'm doing a reading for someone, their loved one, their angels, their life guides are coming in the present moment. They're not coming in tomorrow or yesterday. They're coming in right here, right now. The more we can find the room to be present in our life, the more room spirit has to speak, because spirit is functioning in the present moment. And that's where we hear the message. So I'd say, give them room to speak into your life. Ask the question, but then give them time to answer. One time I was doing a group reading online, and it was a small group reading. And there was this one lady who came in, and I cannot remember her question, but Mother Mary came in and she said to her, and I thought, this is amazing. This is what we do. Mother Mary says, this is what humans do. She says, okay, it's like if you're driving your car and you're lost and you slow down and you're going to ask this person on the street for directions. And you say, hey, I'm lost. And then before that person gives you direction, you hit the gas and you take off. She says, this is what humans do to spirit all the time. You ask for help, you ask for guidance, and then you hit the gas and you take off and you're going to handle it on your own, right? But we have to give ourselves the room and the time to listen, because the answers are always being revealed to us. And if it hasn't been revealed to you today, give it a little more time. It will be revealed tomorrow or next week. The answers are always getting revealed.
So absolutely. This is wonderful. I do want to ask though, for somebody who is just starting out on this spiritual path, if you will, who definitely wants to open themselves up, but is having a heck of a time really hearing the messages back, or is second guessing, or isn't really hearing anything, or feels a bit lost, just doesn't know how to, feels that they're open, but just isn't receiving the message. How can someone improve that?
Okay.
What do we have?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things that you can do. Number one, find out what is your natural meditative spot. So our soul actually is in constant communication with the divine. Some of us get information in the shower. Some of us are driving our car and we're like, oh, as soon as I get in the car, it comes to me. I always know what to do. Once I get in the car, I go for a walk, go for a run, sit quietly in meditation. Find out where is that spot in your day that you feel most connected to source, or that you get your most aha moments, because that is your natural meditative spot. Then what we want to do is we want to create that time. So you might now set an intention. By the time I get to the grocery store, I will have effortlessly received the answer about, whatever the question is. Let's say if driving is that time. The other thing I want to say is consistency is important. So it is more important to set aside 10 minutes a day of whatever this time is to connect with spirit than it is to sit down once a week and do it for 3 hours. It's the consistency, because you're building this routine, you're building this pattern. The same way that we have pathways in our brain, we have like a neuro soul way. Our soul gets used to getting information on this direction, this line, this way. And this is really good, because as soon as we start recognizing that neuro or that soul pathway, we start figuring out where we're getting our information. You can do things like brain waves. So if you want to go to YouTube, I've done a few different studies. One was at IANDS and another one was here in the Phoenix area, where they actually put, EEGs on my brain while I'm reading, and they have a heart scanner on all this stuff. What we know is that when I'm getting my information from spirit, my brain is in theta or delta brain waves. And it's really quite fun to watch, because my brain waves drop when I get the information and spike when I speak it. So if you watch the pattern, it's very spiky the whole time. You can literally see connection to spirit, and then I speak the information. So the strongest hits, or the most information that I get in a reading, are when I can get to delta brain waves. So with that being said, you can do HemiSync. I think that's a paid subscription, but you can also go to YouTube and you can go to binaural beats, and you can pull up the ones with the delta or theta brain waves and then put those in. Listen to that 10 minutes a day, because what it's doing is it's actually calming your brain down to get it to the point where you'll hear your spirit connection more clearly. Now, when I say here, I want to be really clear about that. Usually I don't actually hear spirit talking to me. Sometimes I will hear words. Most of my information comes in as feelings. So I would describe it as looking at someone that you know well, and you know exactly what they're going to say before they say it. It's like it's just there. It's a knowing. That's how most of my information comes through, which is actually very beneficial for me, because when I read for people whose loved ones spoke a different language, if all I could do was hear their words, we would have a communication deficit. But a feeling is worth 1,000 words, right? So the feelings are the way that I get my information. So be open to it. When I say hear information, I'm not actually literally speaking, because most of my information comes in feelings. So start setting aside 5-10 minutes a day for, binaural beats, for a drive in the car, for sitting outside, going for a walk, whatever that meditation spot is for you, but be consistent and you will see that. Also do it like I do with the radio analogy. I want you to think like, okay, channel 111s, that's the angels, channel 107, that's the life guides. Who do you want to tune in today? So imagine taking your radio, putting it on that dial. Maybe like for Rita with her daughter, we want to put her daughter's channel on the healing energy channel, whatever channel we want to come up with for that. Put it on there and just let her suck that energy in, suck that information in. So we can really guide and direct this. Here's one of the things with our humanness. we all often think like, oh, that's a gift for Michelle. Michelle's gifted. We can't all do that. No, we can all do it. It's a gift that we all have. It's your natural birthright. It comes with your soul. It's just part of your communication plan. So now I want you to hone into it. So use the radio. What channel do you want to tune into? Use your intention. I am tuning into the Life Guide channel. Let me see what the message is. And then we need to sit back and receive. Kind of like Mother Mary said, don't hit the gas before they give you the directions, right? So sit back, receive. What is it Spirit wants to tell you today?
Well, it's interesting you talk about theta and delta brainwaves, because I believe theta is the sort of hypnosis level, where hypnotherapy can actually really have an effect. And delta, I believe, is where we are in our dream state.
Mm-hmm.
So would you say another mode might be for the individual to open themselves up in a safe, loving way before they go to sleep and ask to receive messages in a way that's going to be clear to them through the dream state? Because isn't how there is a lot of communication is through dreams, because our defenses are down.
Absolutely. That is wonderful. And I have a lot of people who receive visits from their loved ones when they're asleep. We get these dreams and we're like, oh my gosh. And it was mom and she smelled like she always did and this or that, right? Yes, because our loved ones will come to us in our dream states, because we do, like you said, we have our walls down. And so, yeah, you can ask for information in your dream state. I do not ever remember my dreams, so that doesn't usually work for me. But for someone who does remember their dreams, setting that intention that tonight I'm going to get an answer. My dad is a little bit like that. If my dad has a problem, his answer is always like, I need to sleep on it. I need to sleep on it. And the next morning he wakes up and knows what he needs to do. So that's his mode of communicating with Spirit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, you talked about a couple of people, 3 people in your second your third near-death experience, I believe it was. You said there was an Egyptian woman, an Asian, and a Hawaiian man. And they asked you, what do you want to do? Who do you believe they were? Do you believe that they were your guides? And also, what's the difference between a guide? I mean, you mentioned different people as making up your team. I wondered if you could speak to the various components of that.
Absolutely. So they were my life guides. And actually, I had never heard that term. So I didn't know. I just thought they were these nice people, but I did not know they were my life guides. Here's something that was kind of crazy that happened about 6 months after that. My son and Josh and I were sitting at the table eating because he was in half-day kindergarten. So I brought him home for lunch. And I was so tired of not being able to taste my food. I was sitting there, I took a bite of something and I said to him, oh, Josh, when do you think I'm going to get my taste back? And he looked at me and he said, you need to pray about it more. And I said to him, who said that to you? I thought for sure he was going to say my mom, because my mom was very, very Catholic. And he said, my life guide, Hansen. And I said, what? He said, my life guide, Hansen. And I had not heard that term until he said that. And I said, so I know he didn't get that from me. And I said, well, what does Hansen look like? And he said, well, he's about as tall as Dad, and he has brown hair and brown eyes. And he told me to tell you, you just need to pray about it more. And I was like, okay. Like, I was shocked because I had not heard that term. So then I start looking into life guides. And because of my 5-year-old son, who knew his life guide, Hansen, I was able to connect that the 3 people who I felt like I had known so well were actually my life guides, which is why I was given the life decision from them. So what do our life guides do and how do they play out in this? So I do believe in pre-life planning. So that is the fact that Michelle's soul, which is much bigger than the person Michelle, decided, hey, I'm going to go to planet Earth. I want to learn these lessons and I want to have these experiences. And in that pre-life planning stage, I chose life guides, and these life guides also chose me. So it's very much a compatibility factor. And they said, okay, what we will do is we will give you continued opportunities to get on your soul's path so that this mission is completed, so that you learn what you wanted to learn and you evolve in the way you want to evolve. And so what they do is they are constantly guiding me. A lot of us will notice we have opportunities or coincidences. We like to call them coincidences that keep reoccurring in our life. I like to say those are your life guide source, the universe, giving you the opportunity to stay on track for your soul's plan, right? And so our life guides are very much in charge of remembering the blueprint for your life before you came in, because our humanness does not remember it. So they bring in the opportunities to stay on track. Our angels are very much about protection. So those are the people who are in the massive car accidents. Some people have even told me, I was in this car accident and before the airbag came out, I felt this huge angel sit on my lap and they took the blow for me, you know, or things like that. We know our angels are here for protection, and they really are. That's more their role. But also that one angel, my third NDE, was here to take me home or to make things work out so that I could stay. So that angel did give me an opportunity. So, but it's a protection energy, whereas a life guide is more of a coach. Let's keep you on track. We know what you want to learn. We know where you want to go. And then your loved ones who have already transitioned, whether you knew them in your human lifetime or not. A lot of times I'll read for someone else, say, I have grandma here. They'll say, I don't know my grandma. I met her once when I was a year old. Okay, but grandma knows you. And here's what grandma has to say. Your loved ones come in on your spirit team too, because they know your soul's plan and they are invested in you achieving the outcome that you want and learning what you want to learn. So that's kind of the different roles that they play. And none of us are here alone.
Wonderful. Okay. We have a question from Alex. Are there additional plans given during a lifetime? I feel as though I was asked to do something and I said, okay. And then I was on a path to die and come back to help others. So are there any plans that are given during a lifetime?
Yes, I do not think, so the blueprint is just the blueprint. I do not think it's etched in stone because our soul has a level of free will and so does our humanness, right? And so I want to describe it as this. Whether we like it or not, every human actually has the right to transition themselves. We see people transition by suicide every day. So on some divine level, you will have already been given an out if you choose to take it. Every human has that opportunity. Most humans will not take that opportunity. Most humans will go over the bump in the road, get knocked down, stand back up. It's about the comeback, right? And because of that, we have the opportunity to change plans, change life plans, to modify them, to add another exit, to add another opportunity. It's not that it is etched in stone, but it has to go along with, you can do what I would call, Spirit just said to say this, it's an add-on. You can add on to your life plan while you're here, but the blueprint will be the blueprint. So let's say you're building a house and you're like, oh, you know what, let's just add one more room in the back here. And let's just add an atrium over here, whatever this is. We can always add on to the blueprint, but the blueprint will stay the blueprint.
Okay. All right. Sorry, I'm just trying to formulate some questions because there's just so much I want to ask you. You did mention your little son, the 6-week-old son. I think it was during your second NDE, who knew that you were potentially in that transition. You could be making a decision to come or to leave, and was very scared that you were. So how interesting that this infant was tuned into what was happening. Clearly, you know, he had just come from the other side, so he was still very connected. So do you feel that you have an extra special connection in a particular way with that child of yours because he experienced your potentially leaving in ways that are different? Because your other children, of course, you know, were there for the 911 call. I'm getting a little confused with the order and the age here, but yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, or do they all feel so equally interconnected? But it's interesting that you tapped into the 6-week-old.
Yes. So I would say I feel like I have a great connection with all three. Maybe not stronger. So my youngest is my son, the same one that had the 911 call experience, and the one that was 6 weeks old. I have 2 daughters and then a son. And but yes, no, there are times where I literally sit down and I think, I want to know what our life plan was, because there have been some very critical moments in our life, mine, his, and my middle child, Sophie, my daughter, where the 3 of us are in these very scary situations. And somehow my oldest daughter is not in them. And so I do think to myself, I'm like, what is the soul plan between the 3 of us? Where they were the 2 who were home with me when I had my head injury. And then when my son was older, I'm trying to remember, he was around 6 or 7, and we were out at the beach and he got sucked out in a rip current, and it was my daughter and him and I. And so it's interesting that the 3 of us very often end up in these little traumatic situations, which to me tells me it's happening on a soul level. And there's something that the 3 of us are learning from each other either is that how to work together, that we can help each other? I'm not sure. But yeah, it is interesting with all of the kids. And I would say this, sometimes we have a more natural bond with one than the other. And some of that's a personality conflict. Some of that goes back to your pre-life plan with your child, whatever that is. But with each of them, whether we feel like we get along with them beautifully in human form or not, our soul always loves. And I think this is important for all of us to realize. So let me just use like my divorce as an experience. Human Michelle has most definitely not loved him every day of this divorce. I'm just going to be honest. Like there were some days where I thought, I'm going to die from this pain or this hatred or whatever this is I'm feeling inside of me. But whatever human Michelle was feeling that day, the truth is my soul always loved him. And my soul will always love him because our souls always love. And so whether my soul said, well, he chose up to play the villain who would challenge you to follow through with your soul plan to be a medium, or whatever that story is that my soul knows that human Michelle doesn't know, my soul always loves. And so I think that's something for us to remember, because we are often faced with people in our life that challenge us, and our humanness gets very reactive and very triggered to that. That's our human plan. But when we go up above to the soul plan, the soul always loves.
Absolutely. Now, as far as your work with individuals is concerned, do you these three plans that you mentioned a little earlier, the human plan, the soul plan, and the divine plan, do you try to tap into the human plan and maybe the soul plan to try to help the person align mind, body, spirit? What does your work consist of to help people heal?
Yeah, for me, I really like to tap into the soul plan because our humanness is our humanness. My soul chose Michelle with whatever Michelle's little flaws are or quirks, or you know what I mean? Like my humanness has been chosen by my soul. So true healing happens on a soul level. Well, whether we're talking body, mind, or spirit, the soul is the channel for that healing, whether it's for a physical issue, a mental issue, an emotional issue, whatever it is. So I like to always tap up into the soul plan or into your spirit team because they know your soul plan. So that's where we see the change in the human behavior, is when we reconnect with the soul plan.
Okay. All right. Now, tell us about your experience with Jesus, who came in as a sort of a friend, but not someone necessarily to be worshipped in the way that, the Catholic religion, Christian religions dictate, essentially. So what was that like? That's everybody's experience. That must be amazing.
It was overwhelming. I mean, the overwhelming sense of love, of compassion, of connection, of, hey, I'm your best friend. How can I help you out? That was the energy. So being raised Catholic, I had always thought, oh, I got to pray to Jesus, worship Jesus. Like I might have thought he was my friend, but more importantly, I thought he was way, way, way above me, and I should bow down to him if I ever see him, And so that experience from that near-death situation where he came in as my friend, as my partner, as my, how can I help you? It was unbelievable. And I think that's really important for all of us, because a lot of times we think, when I first started doing readings, people would be like, oh, you talk to Jesus? And I was like, yeah, sometimes Jesus comes in a reading for the regular person. It's not, you don't have to be like a certain level to have Jesus want to help you, right? And so I think whenever we start thinking about ascended masters or these higher levels of energy, for lack of a better word, a frequency, they are available to all of us, and they want to help and assist us to be the best version of us. So whoever it is, or whatever religion you've been raised in, the truth is all of these beings of light are here as your friend and want to support you on your journey.
So it sounds as though it's more of a sort of a horizontal relationship, that, he's there to help you as a friend, as a guiding, as opposed to sort of the vertical relationship, which is what sort of institutionalized religion has made. That, Jesus is a deity, Son of God, untouchable. We are sinners, and we try to aspire. He died for our sins, etc. So does that sort of what did that do to your religious upbringing? Did it turn it on its head? Did you leave that behind?
Yes, I have absolutely left that behind. If anything, I think of Jesus as a loving mentor. So I still know I'm not at the same frequency or energetic level of Jesus, right? I mean, but what I would say is think of it as a loving mentor, somebody who's like, hey, I've been there, I've done that. Why don't you try this way? This might work for you. I mean, that is how the ascended masters talk to us. And so really, I've had a hard time because people have asked me, what religion are you? I'm not really any religion anymore because I cannot find another human that can lead me to God better than my own direct connection to God's source, the divine. And so with that that was one of the things that was challenging too with my near-death experiences. I outgrew religion. I didn't go to a church anymore and hear something that fed my soul. I went and I found things that didn't feed my soul actually, and things that felt limiting and not open. And so that was something I had to outgrow too. And it was hard for me. That also caused a problem in my marriage because my husband was very Christian. And I was not very Christian anymore. I was just open. And I was able to see that it doesn't matter if you're an atheist or if you're this or you're that, you are loved, you are supported on your journey. And so really able to see people as a soul having an experience, and that soul is loved more than it can even imagine.
On a more superficial level, did you actually see him in this experience? What did he look like?
Yeah, so yes. And what he looked like, I'm trying to remember. There's a young girl that painted a picture of him.
Yes, that's where I was going. That's and
that's what he looked like in my experience.
And then there's an unusual, I think it's a Russian name.
Yes.
Like that?
That's how I perceived him. That's how I saw him. And it was interesting because last year at the IANDS conference in Salt Lake City, I was talking with a guy who I'd met a few times there. And we were like, by the way, what did Jesus look like to you? He's like, that's exactly what he looked like to me too. So we have the same image. Now, because of that, it doesn't mean that's what Jesus is going to show up looking like to everyone, because spirit is all about love and compassion and connection. So Jesus is going to present himself to you or whoever in the way that you're willing, ready, and able to see him. So maybe you want the longer hair, maybe you want, you know what I mean? But for me, every time I see or connect with Jesus, that is the version that I see.
Yeah. Interesting you brought her up, because that's exactly what I was thinking in my mind. What do you make of spiritually transformative experiences? Clearly, you've had 3 NDEs, and some people might be envious of that in the sense that you came back with such a strong understanding and quite transformed. But what do you make of the STE experience, and why does that happen to people? Do you think? What's the message on the other side?
Right. I actually love that. I think that's the better way to go instead of an NDE, because you don't have to come back with the physical trauma to get through. You just get to get the message and the upgrade. Those are really important. I think people plan those in their pre-life plan because they say, when I get to whatever age, whatever day, whatever this is, I need to remember that there is more to life than this, the humanness that has overwhelmed me or taken me down or whatever that is. And so I love spiritually transformative experiences. They are absolutely as important as an NDE, and maybe, definitely easier because you don't have a physical trauma that goes with them. But they're points that our soul has created to remember, right? So our humanness is heavy and dense, and it usually takes something big and shocking or traumatic to shake us up to the point where we want to remember. So if you can do it through the point of like an STE, and you can remember and have a knowing or have a message or have a connection in that way, that's a beautiful way to do it.
And you've talked a lot about the comeback. Could you talk about what that is exactly?
So the comeback. So, okay, look, we have comebacks throughout our lifetime. For me, I've had a multiple. Coming back every time from a near-death experience, we get this opportunity of, who do you want to be now? How do you want to integrate this information in your life? And where do you want to go from here? So whether we're talking a divorce, a car accident, a job loss, a near-death experience, an STE, whatever this is, the comeback is the part where your soul thrives. This situation has happened to you. Now your soul says, yeah, I had to have that situation, because here comes the good part, the comeback, the grow back, the evolving, the evolution. And so we get presented with this opportunity opportunity every day. You get presented with it when someone cuts you off in traffic. There's your comeback. Are you going to honk? Are you going to flip them off? Or are you going to keep going like everything's fine? You just had to come back.
I understand. Okay. Thank you for explaining that. I wasn't sure. So am I going to be better because of this experience, or am I going to be bitter because of, we have a choice? And it's, if you look at it as a growth opportunity, when people are going through adversity, that helps change the perspective a little bit. You still work through all the healing that needs to take place, but if you put a different perspective on it, you choose, do you want to learn and heal from this, or do you want to just, shut the world out and put padlocks on yourself, etc.
Right. And sometimes maybe you do both. Maybe you shut the world out for a few days or a few weeks, and then you start growing again. And it's okay.
The important thing is to at least come out into the sunlight again and not permanently in the shadows. And some people, sadly, will stay permanently in the shadows. And that's not really taking the growth opportunity and running with it. As far as your work is concerned, we're starting to run out of time, so I really would like you to touch on this. I know you do some fascinating work. Can you think of any particular examples where you've been able to really touch someone by tapping into the team on the other side and being that sort of intermediary, the interpreter, if you will, the medium, and really be able to bring to the person on this side the messages? And how has that helped them then, move forward in a more productive, wholesome way?
Right. Yeah, I can. I would love to share one of my very favorite readings. And so I was reading for this lady. She lives in the Midwest. She's an RN. She had 8 kids. Her mom was in hospice, dying of, I believe it was cancer. And this woman was just absolutely run ragged. Like there was nothing left for herself. And as I'm reading for her, I feel Mother Teresa come in, and I was like, "Oh, Mother Teresa's here!" Like for me, I get a little excited. I'm like, "Wow, all right." And she said to me, she said, "Well, yeah," she said, "I used to work with Mother Teresa in Calcutta," and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like what are the odds of that?" So anyway, Mother Teresa comes in, and she says to this lady, in the most beautiful way, she says, "I never lost sight of myself. If I had, I wouldn't have been able to help others." And she said, Jesus didn't lose himself to the others, or else he wouldn't have been able to help them. And so what she was really helping this woman focus on is like, look, you have to take care of yourself. Your true purpose here is to focus on your soul plan, your soul growth. And by doing that is how you help others. And so the way that I put that message into my life is like, okay, it took me a long time to realize that my soul came here to be a medium. But by doing mediumship, I am practicing and doing what my soul came here to do. And by doing that is how I help others. So whether this is in the medical field, the counseling field, maybe you're a chef and you love to cook for people. This is your soul's passion. By doing that, that's how you're helping people who love to go out and eat that type of food. So we have a million different ways that our soul has come to express itself. But here, especially, I feel like women are really, really taught, like you find purpose after you serve others. That's where your purpose is, in serving others. But the truth of it is our purpose is in serving ourselves and our soul's growth. And by following through with that, that's how we serve others.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is it's very important to practice self-care, not from a selfish perspective, but from a wholesome, nourishing perspective, a little bit like the proverbial airplane ride where the masks will drop when there isn't enough oxygen. You've got to put your own first before you take care of the kids. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to take care of the kids, essentially. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Any other examples? Yeah.
That's one of my favorite ones, because I think everyone's heard of Mother Teresa in some way, shape, or form, right? But I will tell you, a lot of times in readings, what will happen is a loved one who maybe you used to butt heads with is the first one to come in. I just had it the other day. This lady came over. Her 2 husbands had passed, and who came in first? Husband number 1, the one she didn't want to hear from, and she's rolling her eyes. Oh my God, here he is. That's not the guy I want to talk to. I said, okay, but we've got to go through him first before I can get to the next person. And here's the thing, his message was so healing for her. He came in and he said, look, I'm sorry, I'm owning it. I know I made your life. And I'm trying to remember if he said like a landfill or a garbage dump, but he literally was owning the trauma he had put into this woman's life, something he had never done in his human form. And so although he wasn't on her A list of people she wanted to hear from, she needed to hear that message. And for the first time ever, she heard him own the damage that he had done to her. And that was very empowering for her because she never thought she was going to hear that in this lifetime. And so after we got through his message, then we were able to get to husband number 2, who was the good husband, that she wanted to connect with.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So how would you, how can your work blend with other, more secular therapists' work to help an individual? Because yours is obviously very spiritual. Some people may not be ready for that. Also, we have a whole world of psychology and counseling and kind of secular therapy. Do you see how your work could come make inroads into that world so that people could really get the healing? Obviously, the individual has to be open, as I said, but what do you make of all of that?
Yeah, I absolutely do see that, because that's kind of like the spiritual life coaching or whatever that side of my work is, where I go up to their spirit team and I say, okay, what do we need to know for this person to get them from point A to point B? And they might say, okay, Michelle, well, we got to go back to 3-year-old when they were 3 years old and their, dad told them they were worthless and this and that. And it might be something that person isn't even remembering or in their conscious framework right now. And so we can go back there and we can tap into it. A lot of times that's what spirit has me do. Or spirit will say, look, this person has always felt like they don't fit into this world because of this, 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 and this, but let that person know that that's because they're actually a leader and they didn't come to be part of the pack. They came to see things differently, to lead people in different directions. And so it's really a beautiful thing to be able to connect the soul plan with what's happening in the human life.
And are you picking up anything? Does spirit just come in and talk to you without necessarily your soliciting it? Is there anyone on the call today that you feel you have a message for?
I don't. Yeah. So I kind of don't work like that. I can do that. If someone has a specific question, you can go ahead and ask it, but I didn't, go ahead and ask if there's a specific question. You can ask about like career, love, loved ones on the other side. If somebody wants to ask a specific question.
About 8 minutes left. If anybody wants to, something, that would be great. Okay.
The other thing I keep getting though is an M name. So like a lady, like a Maria or a Mary or something, who is, if somebody's connected to a Maria or a Mary that would have already passed. I don't know if you can raise your hand or not, but I keep getting M.
We have several people here who have Marias as grandmas and Marys.
Oh, okay.
That I know of. There may be others. Let me just look and see. Okay.
So I get pulled back over to Europe. So this lady would have either been the first generation from Europe or like Italy over here. I don't know if that helps anyone nail it down.
It might. It might. Go ahead. It's that description. Yeah, go ahead.
And she's also connected to someone with a J name. So I want to say there's a J and a T connection with her. So she's given me both of those initials.
Okay.
Are we honing in on someone yet?
The J, I think, resonates. Does the T resonate? Yes.
Okay.
Resonate. Yes.
Okay. So can I see that person?
Yes. He's coming.
Okay.
He's right here.
Hello.
Hi. Okay, so is this your grandma or your mom, or who is this?
It's my grandma. She was married to a man named Jacob, and her son-in-law was Joseph.
Okay.
And my brother's name is Tom. So
okay.
There's J's and T's all over the place.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. So here's the thing. She doesn't want to be forgotten. So I think you guys think about her in the family, but she's like, don't forget that I am right here helping you guys every day. So she's a very hard worker. I can feel it in her energy where she is like worked hard, whatever this is, whether it's just taking care of the family or she had a job too, but she's a very hard worker. And she says, I need my family to know that I am still loving them, supporting them, and working for them to try to help them get to the next level. Now, I don't know if this is you. Did you tell me you have a brother also?
Yes.
So which one are you or your brother working on with work, like going to the next level, or something is going to be changing in the next 6 months?
Well, that would be me.
Okay, so she's just acknowledging that for you too. That feels really good. So she wants me to like almost cheer you on because she's like, go for it, do this. Like this is huge for you, and it is time for you to take this next step.
Nice. That sounds like her too.
Yeah, because she's one of your biggest fans. She really loves, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but she really loves the boys in the family. Like she might have had a preference of boys over girls. I don't know, but I just feel that. So I need to acknowledge that with her. And she's also telling me to tell you something about a new car. So either you've recently gotten a car or are you thinking of getting one in the next couple months? Because she wants to say car.
Oh, I don't know. I have to think about that.
Okay, so that's coming in for you too. Whatever this changes with work, it takes me to the next level. So are you adding on to your business? Are you changing companies or what is this?
More like a shift in career, going a different line of work than what I've done for many years.
Okay, she's really excited for you with this because this is the part where you get to step into more of the passion of your soul. So she shows me before, like you were, she shows me a workhorse. So it was like, you were like, okay, get in, get it done, get in, get it done, right? You're very good at what you do, but you really lost that connection and that like excitement about it. This next job, whatever this is that's coming up, it's really good for you. But what happens is it leads you to, she shows me a hallway and a door opens. So this job leads you to another opening, which is going to be very important for you on a soul level and part of your soul's plan for this journey. So either you'll have the opportunity to now speak to people in a way that you hadn't before, or you're going to have the opportunity to now like branch out and do something new, but it feels like it's going to be a great fit for you. And then are there two kids or do you have two boys or where the number two come in?
Well, my brother and I, but then we have two sisters.
Oh, okay. So two boys and two girls. Okay. I'm just seeing what else. What's her connection to September? Is there a birthday anniversary or anniversary of a passing in September? It's okay. I know it goes fast. You can remember later. Okay. Please know that your grandma is showing me a lot of butterflies. So I want to say butterflies is a sign from her that she's around you. And she also shows me, so is your dad still here?
No, he's.
Okay. Because she's acknowledging dad. So she's got dad with her. So I need to say that.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Yeah. And he's one of the J's, of course.
Okay. Yeah. So she's just acknowledging having dad there. Dad comes in, he shows me coins. So he throws a lot of coins your way. Pay attention to finding pennies, nickels, dimes. Dad is definitely wanting to help you get down the money trail, and he shows me green. So I don't know if dad had a focus on money or working hard, but please know that this next step in your career does feel lucrative, but there's something really exciting that your grandma's showing me about. You think you're going this way, and then this little doorway, hallway branch opens. So there's going to be something that is a really great connection for you out of this next step. You think you're going one direction, and you are, but then there's a really great turn or perk that comes along.
So I have to stay tuned to messages to find out what that is, or maybe it'll just manifest itself.
It's going to manifest itself. You just keep taking the next step. So, and that's why they're not telling me what this is exactly, but it actually feels like very much an opening for your soul. So you might have been kind of like at this point where you're like, there's got to be more to life than this. There's got to be more to life than this. And this is the part where it's like, okay, now you get to go live a passion, not just a job. And that's really where I feel like this is coming in. But she's telling me, and your dad is saying this too, you've had a big wake up in the last year or 2 years. And so whether this is a spiritual wake up or just a curiosity, you're really starting to take these next steps that are going to lead you to exactly where your soul wants you to be. You're not off track. You're not a failure. You haven't been messing around. The last 40 years haven't been a waste. You have been taking each step in the right direction to get to this next point.
Wow, that's wonderful. Thanks. Those are all great messages. I'll take them back with me and ponder them.
Okay, and with your dad, he wants me to also tell you he plays with your electronics. So you should either have like flickering lights or like weird things. Your TV comes on by itself. Something like that is a connection with your dad. Okay,
yeah, I've seen street lights go on and off when I go past them.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because I don't actually think your dad was phenomenal with electronics in life, but this is a new skill that he has developed. So you might actually have a radio or a TV that boom, just turns on by itself or off by itself too.
That would be spooky, but yeah, I'll watch for that.
It won't be spooky. You'll be like, thanks, Dad. I know you're here.
Well, sometimes he sends me songs on my music player that just
Mhm.
pop up and that are relevant in the moment. And I'm like, whoa, that's got to be more than coincidence.
Yeah. Your grandma is a very, it's funny that she came in first, but she's like a very, I want to say forceful, like nobody says no to her. And I can feel this, like if she tells you what to do, you do it. And so she kind of came in very assertive like that. And that's why I feel like she led the way. Your dad's a little bit more laid back, whereas grandma's going to be like, I'm getting the job done.
Wow. Wow. That's all amazing. It's amazing that you get all that because it all resonates very well with me.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That was
Wow.
unexpected. Well, we are at the top of the hour, and so I want to let you go and respect your time. And thank you so very much indeed, Michelle. It's been absolutely extraordinary, fascinating, and certainly filled. Your message is filled with hope and love and peace, and it's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure being here with you. I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your Sunday.
Certainly will. I'm going to have a nice cup of tea now, I think, and talk about everything with the people who are here. So we're looking forward to that. And bless you. And I look forward to meeting you in person at the end of August, September at the next IANDS conference.
Oh, me too. I hope to see everyone there.
All right. Take care. God bless.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye now. Bye, everyone. See you next time. Bye.